Hi everyone, welcome to Three Things with Spyglass Lending, where we delve a little bit deeper into the mortgage industry. Not your usual platitudes, not your usual clickbait articles that you hear. We are going to give you the real here. Okay, let's start with the obvious. The Fed has raised rates again. We all knew this was coming. And we know another one's coming by the end of the year. We know inflation isn't going anywhere, at least not just yet. We know that the 30-year mortgage entrenched at 6% or more than likely going to rise, unfortunately, over the short term right now. And we know that the stock markets, plural, here in the United States and around the world, well, they're on shaky ground. We know all of this. But what else is going on? Number one, builder plight, or another way to put it, the plight of the builders out there. This is a really interesting one to watch because there's so much going on here, so much to unpack. First and foremost, we know there's a shortage of inventory. People tell us this all the time. The numbers back it up. Talking about single-family housing and smaller multi-family balance housing. But is any more coming? Well, let's just call it like it is. First of all, the demand has shrunk tremendously over the past couple months, and it's not expected to come back. That's not a great thing. But what's really interesting is that so many builders were already in the midst of building. So what the interesting thing is here, yeah, you have a lot of building starts that have dipped tremendously the past couple of months. Now builders aren't necessarily starting to build, at least not at the moment, again. But there were a tremendous amount of projects still in production. A lot of them just getting started, a lot of them middle of the road, and a lot of them expected to start a little down the road once plans and permits go RTI, or what's known as ready to issue. Okay, so there is a lot coming down the pike. The question is, will it stick? Will the builders make enough money? The good news is the equity boom was so massive through the pandemic that even this pullback we're seeing now, unless it falls off the cliff anytime soon, they're still expected to make some good ROI on this. But will they continue with it? Because there's a lot of builders. Again, they're not necessarily in escrow on the project that they have. They have essentially a hold on the project until it gets to escrow, expected to get their plans and permits in place. Okay? Well, if that doesn't happen, they're going to renegotiate or they're going to pull out of the project. And how much is that to increase? So there's really an interesting thing going on with the builders. It absolutely bears watching, especially in this market. Number two, the equity conundrum. And it's kind of along the same lines, but if you bring it back to just single-family homeowners, they have seen a huge increase in their equity over the past couple of years. Obviously, it was already happening prior to the pandemic. We know it put on steroids through the pandemic. But what are they going to do with that? Because think about Los Angeles for a second. Unless you actually tap out, hey, I moved here 15 years ago, I bought a house then, I held on to it, I refied it through the pandemic, I have an amazing rate on it. Unless you tap out and say, I made 108% on what I did, taking that and moving back wherever I'm from, which is a lot less expensive. How about the people who are going to stay here? Why would they get rid of the new amazing interest rate that they have for a 6% or more rate, or worse, coming down the pike? Where are they supposed to go? New tax bases, new monthly payment, that's a lot harder. So all this inventory, again, that was expected to come on the market, a lot of them are going to pull back from that at the same time that demand is shrinking. I mean, that is a market none of us have really seen for a long time. This is a weird time. This is a strange time, a very vulnerable time in the market for interest rates to be rising like they are. And number three, that dreaded word, stagflation. Well, let's just start with this. What is stagflation? That is when you still have high inflation and unfortunately unemployment starts to increase. Right now, we've seen a good economy. We know that. Unemployment numbers have shown us in the past couple of years that we're strong economically, even though you've got back-to-back decreases in GDP, which would tell us we're in the recession now. The expectation is by the end of this year or the beginning of next, we will absolutely be in recession. But what if inflation doesn't decrease enough by then? What if all of these moves by the Federal Reserve to continue hiking up the rate does not have the desired effect fast enough? Well, you're going to end up in a weird place that we haven't seen. It's happened a number of times since the 70s, but it's not great to think about because it has a huge, huge effect on the housing market. All these other factors are already having that effect, but it's something to watch out for. You start seeing that word pop up all over the place in the media, and you start seeing people talking about it, and all of a sudden it actually exists because they've manifested it into reality. Pay attention to what's going on at the end of this year and the beginning of next. If we enter a place of stagflation, of economic recession, depression, whatever you want to call it, without the demand, with the builder plight, with the equity conundrum going on, that's a lot to think about. But it's certainly going to have a negative effect on real estate and prices. We'll see where it goes. Thank you for joining me Thank you for joining me today. This has been 3 Things with Spyglass Lending. We'll do it all again next week.